All right, so we have all of our textures and I brought it back into Procreate. I've imported it as a Photoshop document, so I still have all my separate layers here. And I just did a multiply layer with some colors to help blend the horn to match the rest of his body, okay? So, we should be able to just merge these down now. Let's see if it ends up looking weird. And maybe just erase out some of that hard line just a little bit. Okay, perfect. And now what we're going to need to do, we're going to make a new layer. This is going to be on top of everything else. So we're going to set this to multiply, and we're going to go about starting to set the rest of our texture into the image. Okay, so I have my round brush, and we're going to go ahead and come in here and all the parts that just need to be brought a little bit darker in order to really define them. So for example, coming up here underneath the eyelid, or I guess the eye ridge more like, right? Some of these wrinkles that we brought in when we use the textures, I'm going to define just a little bit more. Okay, some of these areas underneath the ridge, his nose was a good example of one. Inside of his mouth. Just along the shape of his head here. Really try and bring in some definition. It's right here under his neck. Okay. We're also going to need to put some, I'm going to go ahead and select the shape of the horn so that we can, get some shadow under here on the bottom side of the horns. And then we'll cast that shadow down onto the horn beneath it. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and lighten all of that up just a little bit with my eraser tool so it's not quite so dark. We can come over here and some of these wrinkles and just help push it a little bit darker there. Getting some of these cracks and crevices and really make sure that it's going as dark as it needs to be. Excellent. We can come just looking around one last time. I think for the most part everything looks pretty good. So now what we're going to do is make a new layer, and this layer I'm going to do the eyes and the claws, and as well as blend in the horns more with the rest of his body. So let's go with the claws first. For the claws, I want to do color about like this, I think. And I'm going to use, I'm actually going to use a fat pencil brush for this, because I want it to be able to get a little bit narrower as well as have a little bit more texture. Okay, so I'm starting out by just clearly defining all of the claws here. I'm going to do a little bit on his horn as well so that we can sort of begin to blend those two colors. We want it to match the claws and horns a little bit more. And let's do these ones up here. Okay. Excellent. Now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to bring a little bit orange and a little bit more dark. And we'll use this to sort of shade in the back side here where it sort of connects. Next, we're going to go ahead and bring it lighter and almost towards the green side of things, because we want it to feel like there's a little bit of translucency to these. And you know, that's a little bit too bright, so bring it down just a little bit. That's better. I'm just kind of taking it in from the tips and sort of fading this color in. Helps it feel like there's a little bit more light shining through. We're not going to do it on the horns as much because we want those to feel thick and a little bit more rugged, so we don't want light to shine through those. So we're going to actually ignore the horns. We'll come up here to his wing claws. Okay, excellent. Now, let's go ahead and do the shadows. So we're going to bring it warmer again. Bring it right down here. And it looks like we need to make it a little darker. Okay, excellent. And then now let's go ahead in the highlights. We're going to bring it way bright to really nail these in with some really nice shine. Do these ones up here on his wings. All right. Excellent. Let's go ahead and do a little bit on his horn. A few bright highlight spots. Good. And I think as far as the horns go, that looks about good. Now let's go ahead. What we're going to do, we're going to color select whatever color is kind of around the claw and the skin. We're going to use that to sort of encase it in there, the claw. Okay. Now we bring it a little darker so we can get a little bit of a shadow edge there on some of them. Those look pretty good. And now we can come over here to the horns and sort of try and blend these in a little bit more. I want to color pick that nice deep dark brownish red color in there and bring it through. Alright, excellent. So that looks like it's blended pretty nicely. I'm going to lighten up that layer just a little bit. Actually, we're going to do curves because I really just want to lighten up the darkest part. There we go. Okay. So that looks like it blends fairly nicely, and we got all our shadows in there. I'm just doing a quick pass with my eyes really quick to make sure there's nothing we missed. Doesn't look like there is so far. Oh, you know what? On this layer, let's also do his eye. Okay, so gonna go ahead and get well, let's experiment. Maybe we don't want to do black. Maybe that's too typical. Now red looks like he has laser beam eyes. I think we are just gonna actually do black, or at least near black. And so I'm gonna bring it all the way in here, get it really dark. Okay, you can go ahead and we're gonna get a light greenish color about like this, and this is gonna be sort of the reflected light on the bottom here. Okay, and then all the way to almost white. And that will be our specular highlight right there. perfect. Look at that. He's really starting to come alive now. All right, so next we're going to come back and we're going to have to work in the rest of all of this texture, right? It's not quite sitting perfectly on top of everything. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to get a nice bright color for our highlights. And we're going to come in here and we're going to have to look at where the texture is. And one little area at a time, we're going to come through here and put those highlights on those textures. Now you don't want to do it everywhere. You don't want to go crazy with this, okay? You need to be very selective in the areas you choose, otherwise it can really start to overdo it and it will look weird. It won't look right, okay? As you can see, I'm just coming in here, picking a few of these textures, brightening them up a little bit just like that, you can see, okay? We'll do some on his eye here. Let's do some down here on his lower eyelid ridge. Okay, picking up just a little bit of light as it comes up that way. You can see how I'm really breaking up my highlights. They're not just one, really hard, solid shape, because I want it to feel like it's scaly, right? Not just this super smooth texture. Okay. Got his nose over here. Do some of these big scales over here on his jaw. And now the really nice thing about this is that since it's on a separate layer, I can come back and just erase away some of the parts that maybe are a little too bright and need to be knocked back a bit so they're not so, in your face. Make them a little bit more subtle if we need to. Go ahead, bring it over here to the other side of his head. I'm going to bring this a little brighter. Alright, come back here on the back of his head. Pick up just a little bit of light. Maybe some of these scales over here right by his ear. I might need to pull that back a little bit, a little too much there. Okay. Come in here on his arm and up just a few of these little highlights here. Same with this arm. Go ahead and take some of these and pull them all the way out. Go ahead and knock back some of this just a little bit. We still want it to be highlighted, just maybe not so bright. So I'm just going over these photo textures that we put in and enhancing them a little bit with these highlights so that it blends in with all the rest of our lighting. It feels real and like it belongs there. It's not just, kind of pasted on top and kind of awkwardly sitting there. We want it to feel like it's part of the picture and that it was that way all along. Right? Okay, bring my eraser and I'm just gonna knock back a few of these ones here a little bit. Still want them there, just not as strong. It's all about finding balance. If all of your highlights are equally bright, then they're not really going to be highlights. They're just going to be a bunch of little bright spots all over your picture, and it's going to look kind of weird and bad, right? So you need to make sure that you're very particular with where you place these and that you do it sparingly so that it looks right, that you can kind of mix up the variance of how bright and how strong these different parts are. I'm getting a little bit looser and a little bit more rough up here on the wings because I know that they're going to be blurred and sort of out of focus, so I'm not putting too much effort and concern into them since they're not going to have a lot of detail on them. I don't want to spend unnecessary time on something that's not going to be valid or important when you won't be able to see it all. Bring my brush size down and come over here and start working in some of the scales on his legs here. And I should also mention we're going to have to go back and do all this the same thing all over using the blue for the other lights. Can really see how adding these highlights ties in the scales on his leg here. It really makes it feel like it's solid and a part of this creature. Let's do these scales on his hand here because those are pretty important. I'm gonna go ahead and take my eraser tool and knock some of that back on his hand just a little bit. And on this front arm too, we'll knock that back. Maybe not that much, just a touch. Okay, his tail here. We don't need to get super detailed because like I said, this part is gonna be it's going to be out of focus. I'm just doing some little dots here to emphasize some texture. All right, awesome. Now, I'm actually going to come up here. We're going to brighten some of these up a little bit. I want this back part to feel pretty shiny. All right, so I'm feeling like this whole thing could be a little bit more saturated.